DAGGERHEART have released brand new playtest material that you can check out now for free over on The Void, daggerheart.com/thevoid or something like that. You'll find it on the website. This new playtest brings along new classes and subclasses, new ancestries, new transformations as well, along with new community backgrounds. Let's jump into it. Let's explain what we kind of have. And bear in mind, all these are beta kind of testing sort of stages, so nothing's finalized. These are all subject to change, like when they eventually get released and all that sort of, all that legal stuff. If any of these come across as too overtuned, too undertuned, they will be updated, and they're relying on player feedback to kind of make those changes too. So don't be afraid to actually give some feedback back to the creators, Darren and Press, and let them know what you think needs to be tweaked, changed, good, bad. You know what to do. Starting off with what I think is an interesting one is the transformation cards. So the transformation cards are something that the DM can dish out in the middle of a campaigns of one shot, whatever is kind of going on, as a repercussion that something has happened to your PC. So currently we have 6 transformation cards: Vampire, Werewolf, Reanimated, Shapeshifter, Ghost, and Demigod. From the get-go, the Reanimated one took my interest because I was like, is this just a zombie or what is it? So it says that you have reanimated are corpses who have been brought back to life, which we kind of expected. But so they have this ability Stitch Up, which is during rest you can only clear hit points if you have access to remains of a recently deceased creature. Describe how using this material affects your appearance. You cannot clear hit points by any means except a downtime move or a risk it all death move, which is pretty And then Corpse, when you risk it all on a death move, if you fail, you can permanently mark a hit point to succeed instead. When you do, you still use the hope dice value to clear hit points and stress. So interesting, but how these transformation cards are supposed to be played is in the sense of something has happened, whether it be a curse, whether it be a spell, something has happened to your character, and the DM can hand you this card and like, this is now like applicable to your character. It does also give the option that you can incorporate these at the beginning of character creation for your players as well. And just to be obviously careful, there can be big repercussions with some of these, and they can have big impacts on just how you play that character in general. But very interesting. Vampire, Werewolf, Reanimated, Shapeshifter, Ghost, Demigod. Demigod was an interesting one. I was like, oh shit, but like, what's that? So Demigod allows you to have the Ichor of the gods. Your advantage die is always a D10 instead of D6, which is pretty good. Pretty good stat to have. So like, part of you is like, why wouldn't I take Demigod? And then it's like, when you roll a failure, so this is Waste of Divinity, when you roll a failure with fear, you must mark a stress or give the DM an additional fear, which I kind of love that. So it's kind of like, because you're demigod and you failed at something, it kind of leads the world's kind of overview to that a little bit more negative side. Then it's interesting. This one, like even like the Ghost one, the Ghost is interesting. So it allows you to go from corporeal to incorporeal by marking a stress to transition to and from, but then to kind of allow you to have a little bit of fun, you can spend 2 hope to interact with something while you're in the incorporeal phase. So you can interact with the material world by spending 2 hope. So it could come in really clutch in certain moments, but it's also then you're having to play a character who's trapped between the mortal realm and the veil is death, which is pretty fucking cool too. Shapeshifter is, as you might expect, you're able to swap your ancestry to a different ancestry, and you're able to take one of the features of those ancestries, like the one that you choose, one of the main features that the ancestry has. So the vampire one is very interesting actually. So it basically, you have fangs as an extra attack, as an ability you can kind of attack with. So on a successful fangs attack, you get to then mark a stress to feed, and then feed gives you like a token, so you get to get a maximum of 5 tokens, I think it is, at a time. But you get to roll to see how many tokens you get, and essentially you can think of it just as like a counter that you put onto the card. So then while you have those tokens, you can spend one of those to turn one of your base dice. So instead of your 2 d12s, so you've got your fear dice, which is d12, and your hope dice, which is d12, you can spend one of those tokens to turn your fear dice into a d20. So obviously that increases your chance of succeeding at the roll, but there's a higher chance of you rolling with fear then. So it kind of, once again, pretty fun mechanic there. You can definitely increase your chances of completing certain things, which was also at the risk then of your DM getting more sweet fear to use in the campaign. So Werewolf also has a very interesting one. So it has what you might expecting: werewolf form, mark stress to enter the werewolf form, and then you get additional damage dice when you are in werewolf form. But the interesting one comes when at the point of frenzy. So when you mark your last stress in werewolf form, You roll a number of d20s equal to your tier. So if you're like a level 1, you roll 1d20. If you're level 2 to 3, that's tier 2. 2 to 4 is tier 2? Can't remember exactly, but anyway, that's 2 d20s then. You automatically deal that much physical damage to all creatures in very close range, then drop out of werewolf form. So you can literally just go crazy and deal damage to anything and anyone around you, which is pretty fun. So next up is new Ancestries. So we have another 6 Ancestries being added to the roster. The most similar thing to other systems would be like the elementals. So your earth, wind, fire, and water elementals. So we have Earthkin, our descendant Earth elementals. They are humanoids with bodies are a combination of flesh and earth. So Tidekin, that's the water one. Emberkin, that's the fire one. Skykin, that's the air one as well. We also then have Aetherius. Aetherius are humanoids who possess radiant auras and glowing eyes. They're the descendants of celestials from the Hallows above. Some blood of some sort of celestials, essentially. And they added gnome. We got gnomes in the game. Small heroes easily recognized with their dense musculature, long arms, and large facial features. Once again, each one of these comes with new abilities that are tied to these ancestries. So for the likes of the Earthkin, immovable, when your feet are touching the ground, you cannot be lifted or moved against your will. Tidekin, Lifespring, which is this one's kind of fun, a little bit more support ability. So when you've access to a small amount of water, you can mark 2 stress to heal 1 hit point on yourself or an ally. Pretty nice trade-off. Emberkin, this one's pretty badass. This allows you to engulf your sword or your weapon in flames until the end of the scene. It gives you an extra 1d6 bonus damage to people you hit with that weapon as well. Skykin is Eye of the Storm. Spend 2 hope, grants a +1 bonus either you or your allies' evasion until your next severe damage, or use Eye of the Storm again. Pretty cool. The Aetherius, then, this is the kind of the celestial one. You've Divine Countenance, and that's a weird word. You've advantage on rolls to command or persuade, and then the gnome, you've got True Sight. Advantage rolls to see through illusions, but also when you make a finesse roll, you can spend 2 hope to reroll your hope die. The new communities in the DAGGERHEART playtest are the following. We got 6 new communities. We got Duneborn, Freeborn, Frostborn, Heartborn, Reborn, and Warborn. And you can probably tell what most of them are from the names. Duneborn, you're from a more deserty biome, shifting sands, a lot of sand. I hate the sand. Freeborn is an interesting one. So you're part of a Freeborn community means that you're from a collective that lived under a tyrannical rule and is now liberated. It could be an interesting background, interesting way to include that in a story. Frostborn, as you might expect, is somebody coming from a area, covered in snow, from a very cold biomes, that sort of thing. Heartborn is someone coming from I instantly went to like a Hobbiton or something like that, very homely, very small community, village or countryside sort of setting. The Reborn is an interesting one because Reborn is you were once a member of another community, but you can no longer remember it. So found family. So this is the abilities. So this one has probably the most interesting abilities from what I can read. Once per session, you can spend a hope to use an ally's community ability. When you do, your ally gains a hope. So you can spend hope to use it, one of your friends or one of your teammates' community ability, whether they be Ridgeborn or all the other different ones. So you have to make sure that you know what each of them do. You might have to take note of that, but it allows you then to use it, and if you use it, your teammate gets a hope back. That's pretty cool. Warborn, being part of a Warborn community means that you come from a place that is or was ravaged by war. Very cool. And it gives you Brave Face once per session when an attack you cause. So Brave Face is the ability once per session when an attack would cause you to mark a stress, you can spend a hope instead. I'm not sure if I'd use that trade-off though. I feel like that's a little bit, I suppose, your hope you get back a lot easier though. Yeah, interesting. So the first new class in the DAGGERHEART playtest is the Brawler. And the Brawler is probably most recognizable as very similar to being a monk type class. But they have some interesting, the subclasses do make them distinctly different. And I actually quite like them a good bit. So from the get-go, the Brawler, no matter which one you go for, the weapon, +1 bonus to evasion, and your unarmed strikes are treated, you deal you get additional damage for unarmed strikes, a d8 and a d6. Where it comes very cool is combo strikes is your other ability you get, which means after making a damage roll with a melee weapon, but before dealing that damage to the target, mark a stress to start a combo strike. When you do so that means when your roll hits, let's say you roll enough that you hit the target, you then get to, before you deal damage, mark a stress, and then you get to restart your combo strikes. And you only start at level 1, you start with a d4, but what you get to do is you get to roll that d4, and let's say it rolls a 2, and then you get to roll it a second time, and let's say you get a 3. Every time the results of the dice is higher than the previous one, you get to roll again. So obviously D4, you're limited unless you roll a 1, then you get a 2, then you get a 3, you get a 4, then you get like whatever that is. 1 plus 2, 3, 3, 6, 4, 10 points of damage. Quick maths. It obviously stacks up the different tier. It goes up when you get to tier 2, it goes up to a D6 and then D8, D10. So you could combo strike. Now, I'm a little bit unsure whether you sacrifice your base damage to combo strike. I think you do, because it says before you do damage, you then try to go for the combo strike. Still very, very cool feature. I like it. And it just also, like, cinematically, that feels really cool. Like, you just start just landing bunches. Maybe one of them misses. On top of that, then, you've split down for the Brawler class, you split between the Juggernaut and the Martial Artist. Juggernaut, think of it just brute force base damage, you know, maybe fighting pit sort of thing, sort of character more than very like highly trained character. You get each of your kind of specialist, the foundation specialization and mastery abilities, all based around just raw damage and just kind of getting that extra bit in. So brute force, Brawler is your choice. But if you're looking for a little bit more finesse to the Brawler class, then the Martial Artist is the one to go for. It's the Martial Artist, like looks like you can have up to, I think there's eight stances that you can swap between to. I think you get an additional currency. Yeah, I believe you get an additional currency for the Martial Artist, and it's a focus. And you can spend focus to swap stances until the end of that scene or something like that anyway. But essentially, all these different stances can give you different pluses, minuses, increase attacks or damages, or damages. But all these different stances give you different additional kind of benefits to the rolls or damage rolls or something like this, or maybe against evasion against certain types of attacks and stuff like this. There's a whole list. Like each tier has about 5 or 6 different stances to choose from, so it can lead to some crazy like swapping stance mid-fight. And there's also nothing cooler. It's like it reminds me of the Obi-Wan Darth Maul scene from the animated show, where it's like their final fight in the desert, Tatooine, is it, or something like that? I don't know. Anyway, but it's where Darth Maul finally dies. Spoilers. And it's like when they're standing face to face with the lightsabers, and Obi-Wan goes to a certain stance, Darth Maul kind of matches and goes to an opposite stance, and then Obi-Wan changes again, and he goes like from his to Qui-Gon's, then to old man Kenobi's stance, and like, you know, it's just, I just imagine you see in the middle of a fight, your character just moves the hands and swaps stance to a certain different thing. But cool, that's very cool, very cinematic, very cool. So the next new class available in the DAGGERHEART playtest currently is the Assassin, which I was kind of surprised about because we already had a Rogue, and I'm surprised to see that they released an Assassin. So I had a quick look into it, and the Assassin, there is a distinct enough difference between them to warrant it, and in my opinion anyway, where the Rogue is a little bit more relying on shadows, and kind of one of the main abilities being able to like teleport between the shadows essentially, and being able to really cloak yourself and hide, where the Assassin is more about dealing that precise damage. They have this ability called Marked for Death. So essentially, a target, once you make a successful attack, you can use a stress to mark for death, and then attacks to make against that target that are marked for death gain a bonus to the damage equal to 1d4 per tier. So that means at tier 1, 1d4, tier 2, 2d4. You also have the ability to get in and get out, which means that you can spend, I believe it's hope. Yeah, spend hope, and then you can ask your GM if there is an inconspicuous way or a hidden way into a certain area. The next roll you make to kind of like take advantage of that area, you get has advantage as well. So for the Assassin, you have 2 subclasses again. So you have the Executioner's Guild and the Poisoner's Guild. And so I feel like it's going to be pretty obvious from these names what the difference is. But the Executioner's Guild is all around getting that marked for death status. A lot of them are kind of revolving around that marked for death and applying that and gaining more from, or like facing the enemy who's marked from death, you get more bonuses and stuff like this. You also get Death Strike, which is when so the Executioner's Guild also gets First Strike. The first time in the scene you succeed on attack roll, double the damage of the attack. You get Ambush, so your Marked for Death feature uses D6s instead of D4s. So it's heavily kind of buff the Marked for Death feature, the Executioner's Guild. Where the Poisoner's Guild is more around, as the name suggests, being like a master of poison. So when you successfully hit or land an attack, you then get to like add a poison effect to your attack, which is really cool. So you learn a certain amount of concoctions, toxic concoctions, and it could be like target gains a permanent -1 penalty to their difficulty. The target must also mark a stress for taking that hit. Gain a 1d6 damage bonus on this attack. So you can choose between those three, and from tier 1 you can choose between those three and add those to them, and it only just gets cooler and cooler. There's one called Ghost Petal for your specialization, which sounds really cool. The next class added to the playtest, it was the Warlock. Finally we got the Warlock added to the game. So very similarly, you make a pact and choose a patron, a god, a demon, fae, or other supernatural entity. In exchange for power, you write their names, so you get to choose their spheres of influence with the help of the GM. So whether it be nature and mischief, love and war, knowledge and shadow, etc., etc. Record them below and set their values to +2. Anytime you increase your tier, these spheres of influence gain a permanent +1. Yada yada yada. So then you get this additional thing called a favor with the Warlock. So you start off with 3 favors, and during a rest, spend one of your downtime moves to tithe with your patron, so you can kind of connect with your patron. When you do so, gain a favor equal to your presence. So when you do that, you get a favor back equal to your presence. If you choose to forgo this offering, the GM instead gets a fear. Okay, so you have the Pact of the Endless, which seems to kind of revolve around harnessing your patron to intimidate and to have some more utility type features, where the Path of the Wrathful seems to imbue your patron's power kind of into your weapon. It's pretty cool. Yeah, so the Path of the Wrathful definitely seems to rely around more imbuing your weapon. You get additional, then with your specialization, you get additional benefits to hitting when your weapon is imbued as well. Oh, very cool, very cool. So our last class, but not least, is the Witch. The Witch is back. It's always good to have a Witch. Witch is always fun. I never got to play, but I've played with against the Witch as a DM. Not against, but in the party, I had a Witch before, and they're always fun. One of my favorite characters from any podcast is a Witch, actually. Gormley. If you know, you know. So Hex is back. So this is a little bit different though than what you might know from other systems. When a creature causes you or an ally within close range to mark any number of hit points, so when you take damage, you can mark a stress to hex them. Action rolls against a hex creature gain a bonus equal to your tier. So obviously level 1 that starts off as a +1 against any attacks against them, but obviously as you level up, that will shoot up as well. So you also get the ability Commune, which is once per long rest during a moment of calm, you can commune with ancestor, deity, nature, spirit, otherworldly building, and then ask them a number of questions depending on a roll. Then going down to the abilities, you have Hedge and you've got Moon. So Hedge seems to be tied to obviously a little bit more nature in tuned of a witch. So you can have herbal remedies, start with herbal remedies, which when you are an ally clear 1 or more hit points from stress as a result of using a consumable, increase the number cleared by 1. So it's kind of think of it, you can like buff the consumable by adding some more herbs or spices and stuff like that, or add little bits into it. Tether Talisman, which is also really cool, another support kind of ability. It allows you to imbue a small item with your protective essence. When the person holding the talisman takes damage, you can expand its magic to reduce the number of hit points they mark by 1. So then as you get down specialized in mastery, they're all heavily more around some support type abilities. And then going on to the Moon. The Moon is a lot more kind of obviously related to the moon, a little bit more, what's the word? I always get them astrology, kind of astrological. You get Moonbeam when that's your specialization, which is actually a little bit different, a little bit more support again. And then you've Lunar Phases at your mastery, and Night's Glamour with your foundation start. And Night's Glamour allows you to kind of like change your appearance that little bit, and you gain advantage on presence rolls too. And obviously each one of these comes with their own spells list as well, so you've got a new set of spells, and that's going to be another thing that distinguishes them from the other light classes. Like we were saying, how the Rogue and the Assassin are very similar, but they might have access to different types of spells later on, different abilities and all that sort of stuff. And that is everything that's been announced so far. Let me know what you think. Obviously you can find all this on the DAGGERHEART website. Go to their playtest section, I believe it's called The Void or something like that. Let me know if you end up trying any of these out, and if you do try these out and you have feedback, make sure to throw it back to the actual developers themselves. The whole point of the playtest, people could try things out, see what works, see what doesn't work, and see what they can improve on. Pretty cool that they're already releasing new classes and new bits for Dagger already. It's great to see how active they are with it. They want to keep it going, obviously keep the ball going. But if you're interested in trying any of these new classes out, I will be running one-shots. Join our Discord if you want to join in a one-shot. We can try these out and see what we think. If you made it this far and you haven't clicked subscribe already, we would really appreciate it. Hello, I'm Horse. I'm one half of Dopes and Dragons. Our Irish duo here that like to cover topics of D&D and the kind of how-tos and how to get involved, card creation, a little bit of everything around TTRPGs at the moment. And so any follow, or subscribe, should say, it's greatly appreciated. We do this as part of our free time, and this was a hobby. We really enjoy it. we like to get some growth. So if you enjoyed the video, found any of it useful, I really appreciate it. Join the Discord if you want to get involved in some one-shots and talk to the rest of the community, get involved in more TTRPGs, and I should chat to you all next time. Bye.